For most who arrived in Haidakhan, simply meeting Babaji was the experience of a lifetime. To some, he bestowed the full intensity of his love. You never knew the moment or the means whereby Baba would fill you with the experience of grace.
They came from everywhere and from many cultures, carrying all sorts of karmic baggage. High caste Indians, retired people, drug addicts, alcoholics, neurotic people, and crazies, and psychiatrists and psychologists. Baba treated them all with courtesy, love, patience, often granting the desires of those who asked from motives of love, faith, or devotion to God.
But every afternoon, Babaji would go over to the 9 temples and make pranams, pay his respects to all the different divinities within that were installed, the different murtis. And so I asked him, this was just about as I was leaving in 1981, I was already having such sadness in my heart about leaving. And I said, Baba, may I please come with you over to the Gufa side? It was also summertime, monsoon season, when the river is very tough, can be quite high, and really for me as a woman to cross the river, I needed some support, and Babaji would hold your hand and walk with you if you were allowed to go. So I had asked him, he said, yes, Ramanuji, you may. And so when he was about to come, he let me know, and we walked down 108 stairs, and we went to the river bottom, and then he stopped here and checked out some work that was going on in the river bottom by some karma yogis. And then he went over here and checked, and I'm just following him, very happy to be doing this with Babaji. And then he told me to sit on this rock, which was right near the river. And I sat there, and he went off to check some other workers. And I just thought I was sitting there until he finished. Well, it seemed like half a second, and there's Babaji on the other side of the river at the 9 temples without me. And here I'm sitting on the rock, and I'm a little confused, and then I go into great sadness, thinking that he forgot me. He doesn't really love me. I'm not very important. All the different processes that bubble up in the heart, in the mind, or at least in my mind, when this little incident occurred. And so for some time I was sitting on the rock, and I started crying. I was very, very sad. I felt really left, stranded, dejected, not good enough. And I was crying on the rock, and as with many of the teachings of Baba, as I tried to sit there, I remembered, because actually he said, sit there and do Om Namah Shivaya, which is the mantra that he gave us very often. And so finally I got it in my head, if Babaji told you to sit here and do Om Namah Shivaya, why don't you do Om Namah Shivaya? And so I started sitting there, and I just sat there, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, saying it within my heart. And what transpired in a few minutes was very, very, very beautiful. I finally understood that Babaji, if he said to do this, it's what I should be doing. And so I sat there and did Om Namah Shivaya. And after some time, what occurred is I experienced Babaji's heart and light that was on the other side of the temple just expand very beautifully and enter into my heart. I felt like his heart went into my heart. And what I felt my heart do was just expand and expand in that love and that light. So much so that when I went to leave a few days later, there was some sadness, but I can tell you in my heart of hearts that I've never left Babaji again, and he's never left me again. So a very, very incredible experience.
And so we were in the youth hostel, and I'd go out and I'd meditate 2.5 hours at a time, and one thing and another. And I was doing japa all the time, doing japa and recitation of the mantra. And one night I had to get up to pee, and I realized that the mantra was doing me, and I wasn't doing the mantra. And I went, oh, what does mean? I didn't know what that meant. So. But I knew it was a powerful event, and the next morning I got up, and the mantra was still doing me, and it was just going really fast and fast and fast, and all of a sudden I just went, whoa, and I just went out. And I don't know I got to bed on my own, or you got me there?
No, he was on the floor. He was delirious, and every so often he would kind of come in and out, and every so often he would talk about flying, and he was with Baba, and he was sweating profusely the whole time, and I would just give him water and wash his face, and he was blitzed, the whole smiling, and the sweat just pouring, and he was just smiling.
So that started this little 3-day event of rerouting of life itself. And so anyway, what happened is, internally for me, is that Baba reached down and grabbed me by the hand and took me flying with him. And I went out among the celestial beings. I just spent 3 days over there doing that, just being among luminaries. And then when I came back, Chris and Lorraine had left me alone for a while, and I woke up. I had to pee, and I had to crawl to the bathroom. I couldn't get there any other way, and they came back and found me out of bed. So came and got me, and I just wanted to go back and start flying again. I really did not want to stay on this side of the veil, and Lorraine started pouring anti-plague formula in me and all kinds of stuff, so that I'd stick around, and I did. I had a crown chakra headache for maybe a year. My head just ached all the time, just at the crown. And as I came back into this country and everything else, I could only do the mantra. So for 8 years, I did japa and went through the motions of doing everything else, and was present and accounted for the most part. But I couldn't not do the mantra. It was doing me.
I went to Haidakhan in 1983. I didn't know what I was really looking for, but Babaji gave me what I wanted and what I needed, in spite of myself. After about 2 weeks being at Haidakhan, one day Babaji said in the morning that everyone not living at the ashram had to leave tomorrow. Thinking that this was our last day at the ashram, my roommate, Herbert, decided he would go up to Babaji and ask him a few things that he had wanted to. Later that afternoon, he came back and shared with me that he had asked Babaji for Shaktipat. And Babaji slapped him on the back and slapped him on the chest, and Herbert went into a state of bliss. And that wasn't all. Herbert was told that he could expect more in a couple of months. Well, when Herbert told me this, I was green with envy. That was exactly what I wanted. I wanted some kind of experience of connection with God that I could feel. And that evening, things changed again. Baba said his trip was delayed. So we would be there another day, and we put in another day of work. Well, tomorrow came, and in the morning, Babaji pulled a little surprise. He said everybody could ask for one question of him. Well, it didn't take me long. I knew what question I needed to ask. So when it came my turn in the darshan line, I knelt in front of him and asked him, "Could you please help me to see God?" Babaji responded with no hesitation at all, "You see him right now." Well, that wasn't the exact answer that I was expecting. I felt kind of frustrated because I couldn't explain to him what I really wanted was that connection. That evening, we had Arti on the terrace, just at the top of the steps, the 108 steps. And we had it outside because it was warmer than usual and there was a nice evening breeze, so that was kind of cooling for us. Babaji was sitting there with 2 attendants on either side. And he was, as usual, he was scanning the skies. He he seemed to be looking or receiving messages from afar, and as far as I could tell, it must have all been good news because he was just beaming. He was happy. It was like there was a spotlight on Babaji alone. All you could see was Babaji. As I was watching Babaji, eventually Arti began. We began singing the songs, and people began drifting in. And somewhere in the middle of Arti, I became aware that my body had just expanded into the whole valley. Part of the feeling of my body was that it was filled with 1,000 sparkling points of light, and each point of light was like a point of pleasure. It was a total feeling of bliss. I was just immersed in it. That lasted until the end of Arti, and I was just in a state of my own. It didn't occur to me to ask whether anyone else experienced it. I think they did, but I didn't ask anybody. It seemed like everybody was just totally wrapped up in this mantle of bliss that Baba threw over everybody. I'm sure they all experienced exactly the same thing. So, in spite of my not being able to ask for what I wanted or otherwise obtain what I wanted, Baba gave it to me anyway. And I'm so thankful.
All of a sudden one night I had this dream and I hear, Hoshar, Savdan. And I'm driving with my parents in this big Lincoln, and we pull into a little, mini mart. You know, the mini marts where there's like a half a dozen stores and there's a tiny little parking lot that should be twice as big, but it's not. And we just kind of pulled in their caddy corner, and I look out, and here's Babaji walking down the sidewalk. Now, what is he doing in Stamford, Connecticut? I'm saying to her. So he's walking down, he's got the entourage, the whole deal. I get out of the car. No, the door of the car opens. I get out. And I go running at him, and I throw myself on the ground in a Sastan Pranam, and he just jumps right over me and kind of pats me on the way over, heads for the car. And my parents are in the car. And in the dream I'm saying, oh, this ought to be good. And so the first thing he does is he goes into the front seat, and my father was in the front seat, and he does something loving to my father. And then it was my mother's turn, and she was in the back. And the door opens. Babaji goes in there, and he grabs a hold of her, and he's hugging her and like this. Meanwhile, my mother, who is a rather, what shall we say, prim and proper British-Canadian woman, was sitting there trying to get out of this bus. Like, well, I never. Like this. And then all of a sudden, poof, the whole thing was gone. And in this dream, Babaji was wearing a turban. Well, my mother died, I don't know, 4 years ago, something like that. And before she died, it was 2 or 3 months before she died, she was starting to see things. And different, I think she was seeing her mother and so forth and so on. And then one day, lo and behold, she said, you know, last night there was this most beautiful dark-skinned man wearing a turban who came to the foot of the bed, and he said something to me, and I can't remember what he said, but all I know is I felt more loved than I had ever been in my entire life. It's big, really, really big.
was just so incredible to be with him. Things like that. Every time I have this picture on my dresser and I do a little arty in the morning, every time I look at him, I think, what an incredible experience you've given us. And what love he poured out on us in so many different ways. I mean, sometimes it was tough love, but always you could see the love behind it. And it just makes me realize how far off so many people are. Almost everybody. There's so much love that can be given, shared both ways, and we find it so difficult, and he found it. That's what he was love.